So far, the work done on this project has been largely planned out in advance. Now, as we get started on the ball paths, it's time to throw all that out the window. From this point on, we're making it all up as we go. Most K'NEX ball machines consist of multiple unique paths, whose purpose is to carry the ball from the top of a lift to the bottom in the most visually interesting way possible, usually using nothing but gravity. Within a given path, there may be several different elements, unique and interesting features that a ball must navigate. These can include loop-de-loops, tipping arms, Ferris wheels, spirals, whatever this thing is, long winding tracks, jumps, and truly countless more that the K'NEX community has come up with. This part of the building process is often more art than science, and there really are no wrong answers. This makes the path building process a bit chaotic, but also really fun and rewarding. I often build paths and elements without any idea where they will go or what they will connect to. I just start building and see what happens, making it up as I go along. For those of you who may want to try building your own, it may seem overwhelming when looking at a finished machine, but if you just focus on one element at a time, fit it in wherever there's space, and then add a few ramps to connect them, I think you'll surprise yourself with what you can build. There's tons of amazing ball machine element designs on YouTube and Instructables if you want some inspiration. Really, give it a shot. For this ball machine, I need the paths to be as reliable as possible since it will run up to 8 hours a day. This means I'll have to pick path designs that are a little less risky, but I'll still try to keep them as interesting as possible. Because the sloped floor can catch any stray balls, it's okay if the balls don't always stay on the paths. What's more of a concern is balls getting stuck and causing a traffic jam, so that's what I'll be on the lookout for. Because the machine will be split into 3 sections for moving, I'm hoping to keep each path more or less contained within a single section. To facilitate this, I'll start by building a series of ramps that will distribute the balls from the main path separator to each of the 3 sections. 4 of the ramps will lead to section 1, 3 will lead to section 2, and 3 will lead to section 3. This should hopefully keep all parts of the ball machine active at all times, even if a lift failure skews the probability of the pegboard distributor. With the starting ramps in place, we can get going on some paths. Since the Ferris wheel was already installed in the last episode, I'll start working on a way to load balls onto that first. Since I don't want the wheel to run too often, I'll add a rocker switch before the loading ramp so half the balls will be diverted somewhere else. This is a good example of the process for designing ball machine paths. I don't have any idea at all where the other end of this rocker switch will go. I'm just going to build it and leave it for future me to figure out. As we keep going, you'll see me doing this a lot. Because building a ramp to load balls into the wheel requires such precise alignment, I've decided to do the one thing I've been putting off since this project started, and securely attach the 3 sections of the machine together from here on out. This is a very tedious process that involves a lot of hard-to-reach connections, but now that it's done, the whole machine feels 10 times more stable, and it's very easy to move it all around as one unit. With the 3 sections now joined together as one, we can go back to finishing the Ferris wheel path. I built a mini spiral bowl element and attached it to the top of the rocker switch that leads to the wheel, then built a short section of track to connect it to the distributor ramp. And there we go! Now we can turn on the machine and watch the balls go through the first fully finished path, while all the others fall out from the distributor ramps onto the floor below. For the next path, I'll be reusing the Plinko board from the old ball machine at the works. After removing the mesh wall from the right side, the Plinko board fits perfectly in place. Again, a short track will connect it to the distributor ramps, and I'll also throw in another rocker switch for me to figure out later. Why not? Like I said, we're just making this up as we go along. There's no wrong answers here, it's just about putting interesting elements wherever it looks like there might be room. On that note, I've had my eye on the central support column in front of the Ferris wheel for a while now. There was a rocker arm element in the last ball machine that I really liked, and I want to build a taller version of it for this machine. The column lines up perfectly with a hole in the distributor ramp above, so the balls can just drop right onto the alternating cups and ride them all the way down to the bottom of the machine. For paths 4 and 5, I had the idea of doing a set of symmetrical loop-de-loops that crisscross in front of the machine. I constructed a pair of double looping elements along with a set of ramps to give the balls plenty of speed and installed them across the middle of the machine. To support both loops, I suspended them off the left and right columns to make sure the floor beneath them is clear of any obstructions. To load balls into the right-hand loop, I took the wavy rod element from my old ball machine Clockwork and built several of them into a descending spiral. This will connect one of the distributor ramps from section 1 to the ramp leading into the loop. For the left side, I built a short curving path that weaves around the back of the mini spiral bowl, feeding into a classic yellow spiral from the Big Ball Factory set and dropping onto the loop ramp. With both loops connected, it's starting to look like a real ball machine, and I have to say, after 6 months of working on this project, it's very satisfying to see it finally reach this point. It really feels like the end is in sight. You may have noticed that I've already broken my own rule about keeping the paths within a single section, so that means the loops will have to be removed when it comes time to move the ball machine to the works. This has made me realize, though, that maybe keeping the elements confined to a single section isn't important as I thought it was. So I went ahead and installed a horizontal box truss across the machine to help stabilize the 3 support columns and support additional tracks. I added a ramp running from left to right across the top of it and a rocker switch at the end. As usual, I have no idea how this will connect to anything else, but really it's just about giving myself more options to work with later on. The more random ramps and switches I add, the more elements I'll be able to install. To keep things balanced, I added another ramp running from right to left along the underside of the new box truss with a rocker switch at that end. I went ahead and connected this ramp to the random rocker switch I added above the Plinko board using a long winding path, which I feel is pretty satisfying. You might expect me to build a path leading into the other ramp now, but I still don't have any idea how I'm going to do that, so I'm just going to leave it until an idea comes to me. Instead, I'm going to work on rebuilding one of the more popular elements from the last machine at the works, which was the 10-ball dump track. Like the old ball machine, this one will feed into the spiral bowl, but unlike the old ball machine, I want it to be more front and center so visitors will be able to watch it fill up and see when it's about to release the balls. Because of the confined space of this ball machine, the balls will have to go through a hairpin turn and snake down through the Ferris wheel support column, where they will eventually be connected to the spiral bowl through a hole next to the Plinko board. After building the dump track, I came up with this simple zigzag element and used a rocker switch to have it feed into both the dump track and the left to right ramp. So at this point, we have 9 places on the ball machine that still need to have paths connected. 2 on the left section, 2 in the middle, 1 on the right coming from the rocker switch that leads to the Ferris wheel, and 2 each for the rocker switches at either end of the ramps in the middle. I'm kind of thinking now that it would be best to keep the upper middle section clear so the Ferris wheel and the rocker arm drop are still visible. So I'm going to extend the 2 distributor ramps in the middle so they feed into the right section instead. I'll probably have the other end of the Ferris wheel rocker switch feed into the large spiral bowl, so I'll leave that open for now. Another one of the 2 distributor ramps can feed into the spiral bowl as well, and the remaining one will go somewhere. We'll figure that out later. I'm thinking the 2 spots on the left section will both connect to the dump track and the left to right ramps. That just leaves 4 paths that will come off the rocker switches. One thing that I think would be cool is to have a path that kind of snakes in and out of the double loops, but apart from that, I don't yet have any idea what else I could do for the remaining 3 paths. For the first of the connecting paths in the left section, I've been playing around with an idea my friend gave me for a slow descending zigzag path, and I figured this is a good opportunity to show my trial and error process for building a new element. Here I made a rough proof of concept to see if the idea was feasible. So now I'll start repeating the design a few times, modifying and tweaking it for reliability as I go. I can already tell that keeping this element perfectly level is going to be essential. Now that I've got something that seems to work reasonably well, I'll copy it a couple more times to complete the element, and then install it in the machine. The other connecting path will be modeled after the half loop from the big ball factory, except this one will be a 1.5 loop, flinging balls onto the left to right ramp. Having multiple paths combining onto the same ramp midway through the machine should help ensure an even spread of balls through the lower elements in the event of a ball jam or lift failure. With that, the upper half of the ball machine is mostly finished, and we can take a break to watch the machine run for a bit while we think about the lower 4 paths. Since I already have a pretty good idea of what I want to do for the first of the lower paths, I'll go ahead and get started. The first part will be a triple helix tucked behind the left loop, using an improved version of the banked turn design from my old ball machine clockwork. This will then turn into a long winding path that snakes out through the left loop, back in through the right loop, and around the right wall where it will end in another small helix. So, following the ball from the start, it will roll into the Plinko board switch, fall onto the twisting path in the upper right section, then cross the left to right ramp, go through the lower left rocker switch onto the helix, out through the left loop, in through the right loop, then come back around for another helix before being dropped onto the catch floor and rolling down the return ramp into the lifts. For the other lower left path, I built this little ball arm. Since the previous track gets in the way, I added a linkage that lifts the ball so it rolls back down the length of the arm and then uses its weight to lift the arm back up to vertical. I think it's pretty neat, but time will tell if it's reliable enough to keep in place. Moving on to the lower right paths, I really wasn't at all sure what I wanted to do here, so I started playing with the idea of a ramp that leads into a small loop, and then decided to have it fall onto another ramp that leads into a jump. It was kind of neat, but I just wasn't very happy with it. I felt it drew too much attention away from the other paths on the bottom of the machine, and the balls missed the jump pretty frequently. And even worse, they could get stuck on the lower ramp and cause a backup. I eventually decided to remove this entire element and start over, opting for a more simple jump track instead. This keeps the other paths visible, and it's still pretty fun to watch. Meanwhile, my friend had stumbled upon a way to bend the zigzag element I made earlier into a sort of double helix. So we built a long section of that and installed it at the end of the one remaining distributor ramp on the right side of the machine, passing through the middle of the snaking path into the right to left ramp. To finish off the lower paths, I took inspiration from the 1998 Power Tower crane set and made a reverse chain lift. The ball rides a chain hook to the bottom, and a counterweight brings it back up to the top. This was a very finicky element to get working, and I ended up having to mount the lower gears on a floating axle to compensate for the changes in chain tension as the ball lands on the hook. This is another one where time will tell if it's reliable enough to keep in the machine, but for now it's working well and I really like it. There's just one more thing I want to add for now, and that's a path to make the two middle ramps a bit more even. Currently, the left to right ramp has 3 different paths leading to it, where the right to left ramp only has 1. To balance things out, I'll replace the first arm on the rocker arm drop with a rocker switch, and build a short path that routes under the dump arm onto the right to left path. And with that, all of the paths are connected. I'm hesitant to say the word finished at this point, but this is definitely a good rough draft of the ball machine. Now I have 1 month to test and tweak and refine before it gets installed at the Works Museum. But first, there's one more thing I'd like to do. Moving the ball machine to the museum is going to be a very complicated process, and I need to be sure everything goes smoothly. To make sure I'm prepared, I'm going to do a practice run of moving the ball machine, bringing it from my basement to my garage, where it will stay for the next month while I do the refining and tweaks. With the help of a couple friends, we'll begin by disconnecting the 3 sections of the framework, as well as disconnecting any tracks that cross between multiple sections. We'll also disassemble the Ferris wheel in the middle section. Then, with the 3 sections separated, we can start moving them upstairs. We'll begin with the middle section, which is the lightest and easiest to move. This one went pretty smoothly, easily fitting through the doors and taking its place in the middle of the garage. Next, we'll do the right section, which is the heaviest and widest, being 3/4 of an inch wider than the other two. This one took a lot of maneuvering to squeeze through the 2 sets of doors, but it also made it in one piece. Last, we'll do the left section. The chains and gears have been removed to allow it to fit through the doors, and again it survives the journey. With the machine out of my basement, I can finally put all the furniture back where it goes. It's definitely going to be nice to have the den back to normal. After a dinner break, it's time to put the machine back together, starting with the Ferris wheel, and then reattaching the framework and joining all the paths back together. This process actually went much more smoothly than I expected. There were very few repairs needed, and the tracks all fit together perfectly. The next step is attaching the lifts and the ball divider, and then we can turn on the motors and make any final adjustments that are needed. And that's it for now. The ball machine is reassembled and running beautifully, and the den has been cleaned up and put back to normal. Now I'll be spending the next month running the ball machine for many hours at a time, looking to fix any flaws before I move it to the works. And, of course, recording an intro for this video. If all goes well, the machine will be installed and open to the public by the time episode 6 comes out. Until then, please enjoy a few minutes of uninterrupted footage of the ball machine. And as always, thank you for watching.